Aloha and welcome to the 10th annual I Teach 808 Empowering Hawaii's Teachers in Technology Conference, sponsored by the Augustine Educational Foundation and Sacred Hearts Academy, Honolulu. My name is Sophie Chang, and I'll be facilitating this session. We're so honored to have Trisha Kim, Shelley Deakins, and Janelle Marr join us today to share their experience through a 90-minute presentation named Intentionally Incorporating Blended Learning. Please be aware that we'll be recording this session. If you don't like being recorded, you may consider turning off your camera in this session. The recording will be made available on YouTube and shared on the I Teach 808 website a week after this event. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to Janelle.
Good morning, everyone. We are happy to be here. And if you want to, you can join the presentation with the bit.ly link that you see there on the screen. It'll also appear on the bottom left of each of the slides as we move forward. Let me go ahead. So as Sophie mentioned, we are Trisha, Shelley, and Janelle, and we are here to go through what we really love, which is called blended learning. We all work for the Windward District and in various roles. Trisha is our CTE resource teacher, Shelley is our science STEM resource teacher, and I'm the math STEM resource teacher. So excited to learn with you guys today. Okay, so we're going to start with we always start with a community builder. So this is our community builder for this session. So how are you feeling? It is a Saturday morning and we're all excited to be here. So we want to do this Padlet. Choose a song on your playlist that reflects how you're feeling. You can click on the Padlet to kind of see how that works. And then we will join in there. So this is the Padlet. And so if you've never used a Padlet before, down at the bottom right, there is a plus sign that Shelley is kind of highlighting there. You click on that and you can add a variety of things to a Padlet. You can add text, you can add images, you can add links. If you click the three buttons, you can actually look at all the other items that you can add. So you can upload different things, but we're going to use Spotify, which is an online music platform. It is free, all of these things that we're telling you. Padlet has a limit of 3 Padlets that you can use at a time. So for the free version, then you can add anything you want with it. So you type in your musical choice for how you're feeling today. So maybe you're really excited. And so this one is Shelley's, and she's adding it in. You hit publish, and then it populates onto the Padlet. It's a really fun way to engage students in kind of just getting them to start the day with you. And then they can all view it later to kind of listen in on whatever people are sharing with us. So just one way to kind of build community with your students. Okay, thanks for listening in as we talked about Padlet. Okay. So because we'll be talking about quite a few different topics today, we decided to create a table of contents. All of these link to where we're going. So as our theme is this year, it's the 10 intentional ways to think about things. So we have 5 topics and 5 tools that we'll be talking about throughout the session. Feel free to click on those if you want to jump right to it in the slide deck. Our driving question for today is, how can blended learning models and strategies support student learning? And we're going to be looking at what is blended learning, thinking about medium, modality, method. We'll be looking at tech integration versus blended learning. What do those mean? Why blended learning in the first place? Asynchronous versus synchronous learning. And then we'll be talking about 3 different blended learning models: the flipped classroom, the station rotation, and the whole classroom rotation. And within those, we'll embed some tech things that you can do with them. Okay, I'm going to pass it over to Shelley.
Thanks, Janelle. All right, to get us started, we identify and explain blended learning as a combination of active engaged learning online with active engaged learning offline to provide students with more control over the time, place, pace, and path of their learning. So for this, we're actually going to take a dive and we're going to watch a quick video to see blended learning in action. As you watch the video, we're going to have you think about how are digital tools used by students and teachers. And then we're going to have you share what resonated most with you after watching that video. And is there anything else that you've noticed? Okay.
I can say that the things I've been doing the last 2 years have really made a difference because my kids have scored the highest in the state on standardized tests. So what we're doing here is working and it's helping them be successful.
We define blended learning as the combination of digital content and activity with face-to-face content and activity. It sounds easy to blend, but it looks very different in every classroom. So if a teacher is using something that works really well in a face-to-face situation, they should continue to do that because it works well. If they can find something else that works better, is more efficient or more effective that's digital, then that would be implemented.
What I have online could be completely different than what the biology teacher has online or what the physical education teacher has online. It just depends what you need those kids to have in order to understand what they need to learn.
Okay, go ahead and get the laptops. And actually, anybody that's in a small group, come over here. I need you to get an iPad.
Why I wanted to go to a more blended environment was so that I could figure out a way to differentiate instruction within the biology classroom. And I wanted a way to be able to work with students in small groups while other students are still engaged in content learning.
There's 3 activities. One's a sorting sentence activity, one is an online interactivity, and one is small group that's going to be working with me. Okay, slide to the apps and open up EduCreations. Because we're going to fill in this chart, because this is going to get us practicing base pairing between DNA, RNA, and reading our codon chart. Okay, so what goes with G? C. C. So I'm going to put G and C together like this, right?
I've probably learned more today just by doing this than I have the whole week that we've been doing this.
We looked at the research about blended learning, we defined it, and then we had to figure out what would it look like in my class. And so that's when I went, well, I actually want to use it more as a tool for the kids for like supplemental materials.
Top or the bottom of the cylinder.
There's always practice problems, or you can go listen to somebody talk about the topic. But the kids started to say that we don't want to listen to somebody else, we want to listen to you. And we need your help. And we want to hear your voice. So I started to go, okay, well, how can I do that? And so our technology person said, have you seen this app on the iPad? And me, not knowing anything about technology, went, I have no idea what you're talking about. Teach me. So we went through a process of me learning how to use the Show Me app. And then I started making podcasts. And it gives me a chance to be in their homes, wherever they are, 24/7. It's virtual Weller is what we call it.
And that will correspond to 6 to 9, like it has in the rest of the problems.
The podcast helps so much. It's as if she's actually there and she just goes through it again and you can finally understand it.
I see them, they'll plug in, I look over and they have it on their phones, they have it on their tablets, they have it on computers. They do podcasts for me during class time. I will have specific problems I want to see, just like, do they understand the basics of what we talked about today?
40, 60 plus C. Divide 40 to get C by itself. And C
is equal to 45.
Yeah!
Oh yeah!
For me, classroom time, direct instruction, investigations, discovery, that's all still part of teaching. It's not all online. A lot of the face-to-face stuff is still the most important thing to me. The online tools are there to help make understanding even better, even more rich of an experience for the kids.
We really wanted the focus to be on the teaching and learning part and on the digital tool as a secondary thing.
Kids don't always get it the first time, or the second time, or the third time, and this allows different ways for those kids to get it. The pass rate for my kids the first year was 75%, and the second year was 93%. The state average is somewhere around 60%, so something's working for these kids.
All right, so we took a little dive into what blended learning looks like in the classroom in this school in Florida. So in the chat, or you can unmute your microphone, just let's share what are some digital tools that were used and how are they used by students and teachers? If you want to answer a different question, share out what resonated most with you about what you saw in the video. Is there anything that you noticed that was more of an aha moment? So some go ahead. Yeah.
I was gonna say that like I have seen blended learning videos before, and I actually haven't seen this one. So this one I think gives me a better understanding of like how you can combine it with the like in-person teaching too as well. Because the other ones I saw, it was still kind of like you watch a video and then you do an online form and then you like briefly meet with the teacher. I think it's actually the one that's like there with the girl in the pink jacket, that video. But yeah, so digital tools, I noticed that like all the students had laptops or iPads that they were able to use that. And then the teacher herself, used the Show Me app, and it seemed like the students did too, in order to then do like the recorded presentations. And what resonated with me, or like things that I had noticed, I was impressed and surprised by the fact that like in the video clips where the students are online and working on the laptops, there still was a lot of like background dial or like, conversations that were going on, which I think I tried to incorporate blended learning myself, and I'd love to continue listening to the presentation to see how to do it. But my issue was that like when they were watching the videos, there was like no conversation, like just focused on that. So that was interesting to see.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think you make a valid point, right? Like, and what they mentioned in the video, it looks different in every classroom with every teacher and every group of students, right? So really making it your own, figuring out what do my students maybe need to help support them so that we can have those collaborative conversations after they watch a video and so on, so that it's not just dead silent and they're just walking through step by step what I'm having them do just online. So we can't wait to share with you some methods and strategies to help support that in the classroom. Oops, I don't want to play that again. Okay, so something else that we want to share is this idea of medium, modality, and method. So when we think about learning, we think about these 3 M's and how they really affect the learning experience. So we have medium, which is a physical tool or technology that's used in instruction. So this can be an example of a computer, a tablet. It can also be an example of like a book or even a whiteboard. Modality, so that's the physical learning environment. So that's online, face-to-face, in person, but it can also be a blend of online and face-to-face activity. And then the third, and what we call the big M, is the method. So those are the teaching strategies and the pedagogy behind what the teacher is doing and how that lesson or that unit is structured. So when we think about these 3 M's and how it relates to teaching and learning, we want to really focus on the method as well, because that's the most important. That's the big bang for your buck. That's the one that has the most direct impact on student learning. So it's not necessarily only about what tools are my students using or where they are and how they're learning in the environment, but it's really about how is the teacher using these strategies to help support student learning. So sometimes we get questions about, okay, well, is it okay or is it good to have students use a tablet for this activity? But instead of thinking it like that, maybe a different question is, how are students using tablets? How are we using tablets or another type of tool or an environment to help support student learning and make it more effective? So just take a moment to think about, how are the 3 M's incorporated into your classroom? And this might look different at any time, but just think of a time, maybe your favorite lesson or unit. How are those 3 M's incorporated into your classroom? All right, so with that, I'm going to pass it over to Janelle, and she's going to talk about blended learning a little bit more.
Thanks, Shelley. So the big question is why blended learning? Why do this type of learning with your students? And we call this the 7 Ps. These are the reasons why we want to do blended learning. So I'm going to go over each of them. Starting with the top left, participation. So participation really is that discussion piece and then that engagement that we want students to have with us as a teacher, but also with each other. So online discussions can help with this to equalize the amount of student participation. A lot of times when I was in the classroom, you would see students, the same students, participate every single time. And our shyer students or more withdrawn students or not sure students would participate less. But then you open it up to an online platform, you're going to have more participation and engagement because they don't feel like the spotlight's right on them. So then when you're in person during class discussions and small group discussions, really the ideas can flow from that online platform that you've been sharing with. So everyone, again, gets an equal opportunity to share. The next one is place. So when we think about the online space, it's much more flexible than the in-person space. Using online instruction allows students to learn wherever and whenever is most beneficial to them. In the video that we watched earlier, you saw that they were talking about, the students in the video were talking about how they bring the teacher into their own homes, and they really enjoy that. They can listen to her teaching them at any point because she's making these videos for them. And then the teacher was talking about how they're pulling out their phones and their iPads and their computers just to be able to listen and participate in that. The third one is pacing. This really is, the online space is much more flexible than in-person space. Using online instruction allows students to learn when that meets their specific benchmarks. So you can go at their own pace, advancing them whenever they're ready for that. So it lends itself really well to differentiation because you can pace it out and students can go when they need to go. So you could have the whole unit already laid out for them, and then they can go at a pace that's most useful for them. The next one is personal interaction. And this one is instruction that's often focused on whole class when we're in the classroom. But when you switch it and do a blended learning model, this practice helps monitor student behavior and manage the flow of classroom activities. And then students are engaged in learning online, then they can spend more time working with, you can spend more time working one-on-one. So it takes that kind of that load off of that whole class instruction piece. The next one is personalization. So it's difficult to personalize learning for every student's interests, skills, and goals. But when we put the information online, those components can help teachers provide students with more agency. And we're going to share some of those types of things today as we go through different models, as well as different tools you can use within those models. The next to last one is preparation. Blended allows students to have access to course materials through the online space, providing students with additional opportunities to learn. And the very last one is practice with feedback. So for this one, feedback is this important part of learning process. It can be difficult to provide students with relevant, immediate feedback on all their work. So elements of online learning provide students with the opportunity to receive immediate feedback through responsive assessments and interactive activities. So it doesn't always have to come from us as the teacher. It can come from the space that they're using and the technology that they're using within it. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more, I just discussed it, but I'm going to put into the chat a link for the summary of all of this. And then that way you can get a chance to look at it and kind of make a connection for what's going on in your classroom and how blended learning makes that connection for you. Okay, so we'll be talking about the 7 Ps throughout and how we can make that connection. I'm going to pass it along to Trisha.
Thanks, Janelle. So I think two learning strategies that happen a lot in blended learning and even in the different models of blended learning are asynchronous and synchronous learning. And we have had major experience in this through our experience with distance learning. I think this always happened in education. It always happened in teaching. Teachers tended to use it, but in different ways. But I think just the name and the term asynchronous and synchronous came about I think, heavily during distance learning. But just kind of to review, asynchronous learning is a strategy where students have the ability to access information that the teacher provides, to demonstrate what they've learned and to communicate with classmates and instructors on their own time. I think what we learned from distance learning is that when intentionally planned well, this mode of learning can lead to, very positive student outcomes. And we saw that in examples of that in the video that Shelley played for us earlier in our session. And then I think the benefits of asynchronous is the flexibility and, using it both as a teaching strategy, but also for students to demonstrate what they're learning. And then students, of course, can work at their own pace. So they don't necessarily feel the pressure of having to, understand things, at a certain time. They can take their time and really review what was previously taught through resources that the teacher provides. And even the students who are, a little bit more advanced and pick up things quicker, they feel, validated, and they can also work at their own pace and not feel like they have to wait, for students to catch up to them. So it's very flexible in terms of, all types of students in your classroom. So here are some, just some examples of asynchronous learning. We feel like modeling is the demonstration of a concept or skill through direct instruction. Practice or review is the application of what has been initially learned. And then preview techniques are initial instructions. Review techniques are for application. And then deliberate practice is intentional and requires feedback. Feedback doesn't have to be from the teacher, right? It could be, from students, their peers in their classroom, as well as even different modes of feedback could be, chatting with the students, giving them voice recordings of what, they need to work on, or what they can do to enhance what they've shown you. So those are just some examples of preview and review asynchronous learning. And then we have synchronous learning. And I think the biggest advantage of synchronous learning is the human connection. So when students learn in a shared time and space with their peers, with their teacher, they have access to each other. And teachers should design with that in mind and prioritize, community and leveraging human connections to engage students in social learning. So really understanding that asynchronous is a time that could be used to learn content, and then synchronous learning could be time used to apply that content with their peers, getting feedback from their teacher, having teacher work with them in a small group. That's really when we want to leverage that synchronous time together.
So I'm going to share a tool that you can use when you are synchronously working with students, but an online tool that you can use with them. So I'm going to share my screen so we can kind of see it together, and I'm going to go in and out between our presentation and the tool itself. So the tool that we're going to use is Whiteboard 5. I don't know if any of you had used that before, but it's a great synchronous tool for engaging with students. What I love about it is the teacher tools that are there, and then the ability for students to kind of be in the classroom together, that human connection that Trisha was talking about, but we're still engaging some technology that's with us. So these are the tools that we're going to use. We're going to do an activity called this or that. So I'm going to show you kind of the goal and objectives of it. So given the choice of two related objects of interest, you're going to decide which one is your preference and put your choice on your whiteboard. And then you're going to find a partner, and I'll show you how you can see that with the teacher view in just a moment. That, Shelley, I think the link is the one in text in the facilitator agenda. Response to the chat in private, and we're going to do a response to the chat. So I'm going to open up my Whiteboard-Fi. So we're going to put the link in the chat, and then you're going to sign in. You can just add your name. What's great about this too is students don't need any special sign-ins. You can just go ahead and click on the link and you can join. And then as you join, I can see who's joining. Okay, so if you look on the left-hand side, there are a bunch of tools. So you can try any of those tools that you are interested in. So there's text, there's a pen. You can even input images and shapes and even emojis, which I really think students really enjoy looking at. So I see you populating on my screen. So thanks for participating. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and push out our first one. You can see how it would work with students. So now everyone should see on their screen cat or dog or cat. And then you're going to grab your pen tool and circle, or you can grab an emoji and tell me which one is your choice, dog or cat. And then based on that choice, thanks, Shelley, happy faces. You can see here that we're choosing, thanks, Sophie. Sophie chose a cat. And then you can see real time what students are choosing as you go through the synchronous activity. So you can preset the different activities on the different pages for your students, and then you can push it out to students and they can work on it, and then you can see how they're working on it. You can just do live where you just write things down and then you can push it out to students as well, so that students can see what you're doing. Okay, and then you can switch and change that up. So because we're a smaller group today, I'll just kind of push one more so we can kind of see it happening again. So I'm going to go ahead and push this next screen. And then now everyone should see call or text as a choice, and then you can make a selection from there. This is really great for any content that you want to do, but as a math teacher, I really love Whiteboard-Fi because I can put up problems and I can actually see students and have them show me their thinking, and just a little bit different than a regular physical whiteboard. And then you can keep this, so you can actually print out or upload this as a PDF so you can keep evidence of what students are thinking. So it's a really fun way for that synchronous learning with a tech tool involved. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go back to our presentation slide. Thanks for participating. And if you're interested, there's a link here on slide 15 that kind of tells you a little bit more about Whiteboard-Fi. There is a free option. It has a little less features than they did when we were in our time when we were doing distance learning, but it still has some great options that you can use. And then there's some paid versions as well. So here are the features. This is my this or that activity. So if you want to use this later, you're more than welcome to. So these are the free features that you have available to this Whiteboard-Fi. For free features, the one that you set up for your students, it closes after 120 minutes of inactivity. So if you're not using it after 2 hours, it does close itself, and then it doesn't save anything. So that's just something to remember as we plan forward. And then if you're interested in this, there's a how-to video as well. Okay, so hopefully it was fun, and then you think about you might want to use it with your students. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pass it back.
Awesome. Thanks, Janelle. All right, so what we're going to do now is we are going to just share a little bit more about blended learning models. So there are many different blended learning models, and these models are structures and patterns that help teachers organize online and in-person learning activities and experiences for the blended learning classroom. How a course or class is structured really depends on many factors, many of including physical learning environment, the school and students' access to technology, the age and ability of the students, as well as the teacher, and the length of class time. So these are 6 blended learning models that are maybe familiar to many of you. But for today's session, we are going to be going over these 3. So the flipped classroom, which flips the traditional structure where we do in class and on after. So like for homework. The second is station rotation, in which students are rotating through stations within a class period. And then the whole group, where we're switching as a whole from online learning to face-to-face instruction and learning. So with that, if you want to learn more information about the blended learning models, I'm going to go back just a slide here. There's a link at the bottom of slide 20 that provides a description with video examples of all these different types of learning models. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Trisha, and she's going to talk to us about our first blended learning model, flipped classroom.
Thanks, Shelly. And instead of explaining it, we're just going to play a really short, really cute video that explains what a flipped classroom is.
This is a classroom. The teacher stands at the front, and the students watch and listen. You'll recognize this because it's probably how you were taught and how your parents were taught before you. But there are a lot of problems with this approach to teaching. You see, not all students learn at the same speed, so some get left behind. And while some students learn better by listening, others may learn better by doing. This means that teachers can't always do the best job they can. But there is another way. The flipped classroom addresses these problems and makes learning more personal. First, the teacher makes a video that delivers the content they'd usually teach in class. Then they share it online with students who can watch it before the next lesson. This leaves the teacher free to spend class time leading activities that help students apply the knowledge. Students can rewind and re-watch a video as many times as they like and come back to class with questions for the teacher. So keeping up with the class is no longer an issue. Students can access the video at any time using mobile devices, giving them the ability to learn more independently. Instead of sitting and listening, students can spend class time applying knowledge in more practical ways. And teachers are free to spend their time working with students and giving them individual support and attention. The flipped classroom model is already making a difference to students and teachers worldwide, so get involved. Discover more at flippedinstitute.org and become part of the movement.
So hopefully you were able to kind of just understand what we're going to be sharing in a little bit regarding flipped classroom, and not really paying attention to the paper stop motion video and imagining all the time it took to make that video, because every time I watch it, that's what I think about also. But if you can go to the next slide, Shelly.
This is a classroom.
I think, these are some benefits to doing, this kind of, or having this kind of classroom and teaching in this way. It really utilizes, class time to be more personal, a chance for students to work together, to demonstrate their learning, and then for the teacher to provide, small group instruction, one-on-one instruction if needed. And it really allows the teacher to differentiate their learning. So really, I think what teachers always say that is their most valuable is time. And so this really allows for the teacher to have more time to be able to do these things, and really for students to learn, I think in their own way, and really take time to understand the teaching that the teacher is trying to do. So these are just some benefits that we wanted to share. But we're going to get into now how to create or steps to create flipped learning. So 3 steps that I'm going to kind of go over. And then we also included some examples of lesson plan templates that you can utilize. And I'll put it in the chat right now, or Shelly is. Thanks, Shelly. But you know, this can just help with the planning process, because I think especially if you're not used to this kind of teaching, it is going to take some intentional planning prior to you know, going and implementing. So you can use those just as a helpful tool to plan. But the first step to designing a flipped lesson is really the inquiry and exploration. And this is, again, I think, understanding, you know, where the students are at. So posing a question or gauging prior knowledge, even encouraging students to make predictions. If we're thinking of like an NGSS lesson, you're going to show a phenomena and you're going to have students discuss and talk about, you know, what they saw. And that's really going to help gauge where the students are at for you, and then really help you to decide, you know, what you can flip. But these are just some examples of how you can, you know, see or provide inquiry and exploration in the lesson. The next step is where you're actually going to flip and engage. So there's there's various ways you can do this, but really it's deciding what information are you going to flip. So in the video that we showed earlier about blended learning, right, the teacher kind of flipped the whole lesson, you know, where she's demonstrating how to do, you know, certain kind of math topics, right? And it gave the students a chance to really, you know, watch what the instruction was, pause, rewind, you know, and this is kind of what essentially you would want to do. It doesn't always have to be that way. It doesn't have to be the teacher. You could show videos, you can give them text to read, passages to read, you know, in a certain book, but really deciding what information you're going to flip and then what form of media. And then also thinking about how will you engage students around the flipped content to encourage critical thinking. The next step is extending and applying. So this is where they're going to take what they learned on their own, and then you're going to design a student-centered application of learning. So again, this can be in a form of small group instruction. It can be in the form of collaboration where students are working together. It can even stay individual, and students can do things on their own, say in using a hyperdoc or something, but really this is like the meat of everything, and this is where you want to be able to apply, or students want to apply what they learned from the flipped content. So I'm going to just share different types. I kind of talked about it really briefly, but different types of media that you can use. So flipping the text could be having students use different types of text, whether it's, you know, from a book, from a passage, or even digital content. So ReadWorks, Generation Genius, there's tons of like digital content that you can use. If you have certain programs that allow you, like it's a subscription base, a lot of times you can annotate the text, you can highlight, students can, you know, write down questions that they might have, or, you know, give their insight and opinion. But really utilizing text as the media of the content that you're trying to flip. The next one, next type of media is even images. So really photos, artwork, graphs, flowchart, maps, you know, allowing students to really digest visual content to be able to draw conclusions of their learning and what visual content is trying to tell the student. So I kind of put in some examples of images that you can pull from. So Google Arts and Culture are great, like they have great art pieces and things that students can look at. ThingLink is a great like AR, VR, virtual field trip type things that you can take the kids through and they can access. And then even the Natural History Museum has really good content to use when you're trying to show visual images. And then I think what we're most used to in seeing is flipping with video. So this is where you can find videos like from Khan Academy or PBS Learning, or even a TED Talk, to also even creating your own videos, and you as the teacher, right, are teaching the content. So it's really interesting. I think kids like to watch the teacher teaching versus in-person teacher teaching. It seems to be I think more fun for them to see the teacher on the screen versus in person sometimes. So I know it's a scary, uncomfortable way to provide instruction, but really useful in the terms that, they can kind of take their time, pause, rewind when they're doing their learning. So these are some just examples of different types of media you can use in your flipped classroom. So what I'm gonna show you next, or after this video, is I'm gonna show you a tech tool called Wakelet that you can use for both content creation, so trying to gather and organize and then implement, different resources you want your students to engage in. Or it can be even used for students to, engage in their own learning by gathering, different types of resources. So we're going to just show a quick video. John Spencer is awesome. We brought him down to Hawaii because we were such fangirls of him, but really we like all of his content that he shares. But this is just a quick video on content curation.
We live in a world of instant information. With the tap of a button, we can read articles, watch videos, listen to podcasts, and engage in rapid-fire conversations about just about anything. And the traditional gatekeepers are gone, which is great for students. They can create and share their work in ways that were previously unimaginable. But there's a cost. If we're not careful, we can mistake the speed of consumption for the depth of knowledge. And that's why we need students to learn the art of curation. Curators ask thoughtful questions and find resources that are accurate and interesting. They geek out on the content, finding the takeaways and making sense out of new ideas. As this happens, curators organize their content into categories or themes. They make connections between seemingly opposite artists and ideas and disciplines in ways that make you think, man, I had never considered that before. And they're also able to determine trends from multiple sources. Eventually, they add their own unique lens and share their work with an authentic audience. And that's ultimately what we want students to learn how to do.
So, I mean, we as teachers definitely, I think, curate resources for our kids in various ways. And one tool to be able to do that is Wakelet.
We live in a world of instant information.
If you go to the next slide, Shelly. So Wakelet is a free platform for educators to allow you to create and organize your content to share with your students. And then students can share with teachers or others. And then just like Padlet, you can share videos, articles, images, links, and then even add your own text and content. And then you can easily share that link to your of your Wakelet with other people, as well as there's even ways to collaborate on the same board, and then share that with others. So it's a pretty neat platform to use when we're thinking either to provide resources for our students in a flipped classroom, or in other blending learning models, or it can even be for students to demonstrate their learning, or organize, their resources when they're doing research and things like that. So it's a very cool resource and it's free. So if you go to the next slide, Shelley, this is just some examples of, Wakelet for educators. And here's like 6, very easy ways that you can implement Wakelet in your classroom. And then I also give some examples for students in this video that you can watch on your own time. But really, when we're thinking about Wakelet for students, there are a couple parameters to think about. So students that are 13 and over, can use Wakelet using their own accounts. If you are in a DOE school, we have what is called data sharing agreements that need to be made. I did check, Wakelet is not on the data sharing, doesn't have a data sharing agreement, but that doesn't mean that you're not able to use it. You can use it through sharing a collection, which I'm going to share with you in a little bit. And that's when younger students, I think, they don't necessarily have to have their own accounts, but they can, you can create a classroom and share that classroom through Google Classroom or even just through links. Or you can share, a Wakelet as a teacher that students can contribute to. So different ways I think you can use it. We provide some examples there. Yeah, for DOE, there's a lot of restrictions on digital subscriptions. And it really came apparent during distance learning, but more and more schools are starting to realize that these things need to be put in place before you can use it in your classroom. So if we go to the next, let's explore. So I created a Wakelet, and you can enter my class. So if you click on that class code, sorry, not click on the class code, but I'm going to put that class code in the chat. Sorry. Oops, I'm too far. So we're going to go to wakelet.com, and then I'm just going to put this class code in the chat, or you can type it on your own. And then what it's going to do is we'll take you to my Wakelet. Or you can also use that direct link that Janelle put in. I think it'll take you as well. So different ways that you can have your students get into the board. And what's nice, so when we talk about, data sharing and student privacy, students do not have to put their names, but realizing, if you're trying to keep track of what students are doing, you can assign them to anonymous names and things like that. But for our purposes, Shelley doesn't care. So we can just put Shelley's name there, and then it's going to take you to just some content resources that I use to help with understanding what flipped classroom is. So really understanding that you can utilize a Wakelet board to curate resources that you want to share with students, or for students, to curate resources on their own on a particular topic. But these are ways to, I guess, organize, right, their thoughts and ideas in one space. So really understanding that students need to be taught and they have to practice these kinds of skills. I think if you were just to give a kid, a board and have them, they would have all kind of different things, on it that necessarily don't really go together. So really trying to teach them how to curate and organize their resources on their own. So that's just kind of an example of how you can use a class code to share a link to a specific board for students to access. So really when you're thinking of a flipped lesson, you can put all the videos, right, all the text, all the resources that you want students to engage in prior to coming to class, or even during your lesson and small group rotation. You can have this as a place for students to go to access the content in one place versus giving them all kind of links in different places that it might confuse them. So this is just an organized way to keep all the resources in one place. So that was our tech tool for flipped learning. So, try it if you haven't used it. It's a really great resource for in terms of flipped learning that you can use. And then we just put links for you to how to sign up and create your account. But again, it is free for educators. And then I know we didn't actually engage in a flipped classroom or a flipped lesson, but we did this kind of similar PD with our teachers. And we had various levels, K through 12, as well as various content areas. And these are our specific content areas that we support teachers in. So we provided examples of different flipped lessons in these various areas. So you can engage in that when you have time, but these are just some examples of a flipped lesson for CTE, science, and math.
Thanks, Trisha, for sharing all the wonderful things about Flipped Classroom. So we said we talk about 3 different models today. So the next one we're going to talk about is station rotation. So this is one model that you can use with your students when doing blended learning. So for station rotation model, it really is a model of forming small group instruction where students rotate through learning stations in the classroom, and at least one of these stations is an online learning station. So you might have done station rotations before, but within the blended learning model, we want to include at least one online learning station for students. And thinking about everything that we shared since the presentation began, that online station is going to be curated so that it supports students' learning of whatever skill or topic that you're involved in. Some features that it might include are integration of technology and online learning opportunities. It helps to differentiate student learning to challenge various skill levels. As we all know, our classrooms are filled with various skill levels, and the station rotation helps for us to differentiate for that. And then it creates a flexible structure to work individually with students, and it supports students' voice and choice. So we're going to watch a video here by Catlin Tucker, where she talks a little bit about how can we take a traditional lesson that you might have for your students and change it so that it becomes more of a station rotation model. It's just a real quick one.
All right, You guys are already in the station rotation groups you're going to stay in today. So this will be station rotation 1, 2, 3, and 4. Each of the rotations has... I think there's a lot of reasons why it's effective. I know for me, there's really clear reasons why I do it. You know, a lot of teachers are dealing with large class sizes, and it can be really challenging to personalize instruction, to differentiate instruction for really varied skill levels. So for me, it creates these smaller learning communities within the larger class and creates more opportunities for me to work with small groups of students. There can be multiple stations that don't require technology or have technology. They're completely offline stations, and that flexibility makes it really attractive for a lot of teachers, particularly those of us who don't have a ton of technology at our disposal. And so what I tell teachers when I'm training is go horizontal with your agenda, which means lots of teachers plan their lessons with a linear agenda. We're going to do this first, and then this, and then that. And they might have 3 or 4 tasks on the agenda for that day. And so my idea is if you kind of go horizontal and you just take each of those tasks and make it a station, it's an easier way to kind of go from a traditional lesson plan to a blended lesson plan. So if we're going to read an article, if we're going to have a discussion, if we're going to go over grammar, why not have a small student-led discussion group, a small group reading and doing annotating, and then one group over here doing the online grammar piece. So we're still getting through everything that would be in a traditional agenda, but it's happening in stations as opposed to us walking through it kind of lockstep as a class. And when you move through a lesson lockstep as a class, there are fewer opportunities for kids to get support, ask questions, and so stations just create that kind of natural environment where kids can collaborate, they can problem solve together and ask each other questions.
So I think what's really important about this model that she's talking about is that you can take any lesson that you've done in the past and instead of going vertical with it, go horizontal with it, as she showed in the image. How can you take what you're already doing with your students and break it up so you do get that individual support for those students that is necessary for a lot of our students that we have. So we just have a reflection question that after this. So for those of you who have experience with small group instruction or stations, what do you feel that are the learning benefits for students? So if you want to put it in the chat, that'd be great. For those of you who are watching the recording, just something to think about, right? What if you're using this already, what kind of resonated with you with what was in the video, as well as what do you already know are benefits for students? So we can go on to the next slide. So these are really want to be thinking about purposeful planning. So what will stations what stations will bring the most value to your student learning? And when you do, you don't need to include all the options in your lesson. So it doesn't have to be everything. You don't even have to have a teacher-centered station. It can be all student-led and student-directed. And as a teacher, you can kind of flow around. So these are just different options that you could have within your station rotation as we think about how to plan forward. So again, we're intentionally designing our stations. So for our teacher-led station, it might be small group instruction, skill building. It might even be some remediation or some feedback and formative assessment. When we head to that offline learning station, we're looking at maybe possibly small group discussions, labs, active reading and writing, collaboration, discussions, pair practice. It's for those offline stations, it's really helpful to have peer-to-peer interaction. And we keep coming back to that human connection. When we go to the online stations, there's a variety of different things that you can do with your students. And you might already have things that you're incorporating that's online that you can then put into a station, like the personalized practice. A lot of us use technology and different programs with our students. So this could be one of those stations that you use. They could do collaborative work within the space using many of different platforms. We're not going to share a lot about Google, but Google has all those collaborative spaces that they can work within. And then they could do multimedia lessons like the Wakelet and things like that Trisha already shared. Then when you're considering station rotations, these are some things that you might want to consider. How are you going to establish norms for smooth transition and management? How much time do students spend at each station? So depending on how much block of time you're working with, that'll vary. And you don't have to go through every station, every class period. So for me, when I was teaching, 45 minutes was my block of time that I had with students. And 45 minutes is just not a lot of time to go through a lot of stations. But what I could do is divide up my stations. So we would go over 2 to 3 days of time, and we would work through 4 to 6 stations during those 2 to 3 days. What will be the cue for transitions, especially for the little ones? It's really helpful to have some kind of cue so they know that, oh, it's time to move and clean up and then move again. What materials will you need? And then how are these hands-on materials needed? This is more for like when we were doing offline. So, or doing distance learning. So I should have probably taken that out. But an idea, cleanliness and everything is really good, no matter what time of year, what time it is we're using it. Yeah, so definitely thanks for writing that in the chat about how to keep them, make sure they're really on task. So it's really important to be clear and have those management ideas in place. I always encourage teachers to start slow. So maybe you're only going to have 2 stations at a time. And then if they have trouble kind of managing themselves, you bring them back. And we talk about like, what do we know? What do we need to do? What are the expectations? Okay, let's try again. So it's just about a practice. I just met with some teachers, and they were talking about how it's taken about a quarter and a half to get students engaged in doing this at elementary level. But now it's smooth sailing. They're in 3rd quarter and the kids know the routine and it's going. So it does take some investment in the beginning. So definitely worthwhile though, based on all the experience that we've had, as well as conversations that we've had with other teachers. So like Trisha shared with the flipped classroom, we did do this with teachers in a professional learning that we did. So we do have examples for each of the content areas that we support on how you could do station rotation. So if you click on those presentations, it kind of leads you through with some facilitator notes down at the bottom. So you can kind of see how to possibly set this up and facilitate it with your own students.
Awesome. Thanks, Janelle. All right, so our next segment is going to just be quickly discussing classroom management. Janelle kind of alluded to it earlier, but when we're thinking about classroom management, especially with the 2 blended learning models we just shared, flipped classroom and station rotation model, a lot of questions we get is, how do I manage my classroom when students are doing different things at a different time versus me guiding through and going through my lesson plan step by step. So instead of thinking about classroom management in that sense, we want to shift our thinking a little bit to classroom leadership, because classroom leadership allows us as teachers to maybe shift some of that ownership from it being teacher driven and teacher centered to more of the students driving that and really helping them kind of build and encourage leadership in the classroom. So some things where we're kind of shifting from management to leadership in a blended learning classroom could be, instead of having rules written on the walls, we shift towards engaging our students and having them co-construct norms with each other and with the teacher. This also allows for a change from extrinsic motivation to intrinsic motivation, meaning that instead of them just necessarily following the rules because of the rules, really taking into themselves, this is the rules, I'm really interested in this, I feel very strongly about these norms, I want this in my classroom. Again, switching from maybe not necessarily student-centered, but student-led. That way students are really controlling that environment, but also leading to and helping expand their learning. Teacher controlled versus shared control. This is a really tricky one because as teachers, it's challenging really, right, to let go of some of that control. And this doesn't necessarily mean you're going to allow students to do whatever they want all the time, but it just really focuses on allowing students to have more voice and choice in certain opportunities within the classroom, but also gives you as a teacher more time to provide timely feedback to your students or coaching them through things when they need it. And then lastly, again, ongoing feedback, but also having that open dialogue about improvement. So it's not necessarily only the teacher giving feedback, but it's also having that dialogue with students and making sure that they share with each other some ways to improve, but also the students giving the teacher some feedback on how they might learn or how they can improve that as well. So here's just a slide about co-creating norms with your students, of course, focusing really on that kid-friendly language, making sure that students are coming up with these norms, but also they're posted and referred to every day. And then we reflect on it at the end of the lesson or even at the end of the day. Just making sure that everyone feels safe in that environment so that we can thrive and really use that time we have together in a constructive manner. Some transition strategies that we talked about a little bit earlier, but we'll just want to touch is the device management. So protocol, really allowing your students to switch their attention from their device to you. So maybe it's like a transition, attention getter. It could also be how students put away their devices, get their devices. Another thing is the classroom courtesy. So sometimes when we're working on tech, students are so engaged and maybe they're watching a video or something. So using a transition or attention getter and really saying, for example, I need your classroom courtesies for a second. And then they would go ahead and kind of turn their screen down if they're using a computer or flipping their iPad over, just so that we give all the attention to the speaker or the teacher. So here are some lists of transition attention getters, if you will. So we have a link on slide 52 if you're interested in doing that. This is a variety of, this is hocus pocus, let's all focus, 1, 2, 3, eyes on me. You can also use different things like a timer, sound, a specific music piece that you want to use to get your students back, get their attention, or have them switch stations. For this segment, a tech tool that we're going to share is called Classroom Screen. So I think Trisha or Janelle is going to pop that link into the chat. But what we're going to do is I just want you to go to classroomscreen.com. This is a free tech tool, which we, of course, really like. So you're going to click launch now, and I want you to just take maybe 2 minutes, and I want you to go ahead and explore Classroom Screen. I'll just share with you a few things. There are widgets on the bottom. So to get more widgets, you can click on this More Widgets tab here and can take a look at the widgets. You can change the full screen. And then on the bottom right, there is a plus button and you can add more screens. I definitely think this is my favorite background. All right, so about 1 to 2 minutes, go ahead and just check out Classroom Screen, and then we'll meet back and we'll just go over some of the main things. All right, we're gonna go ahead and come back. So if you're following along with me, yes, it's one of my favorites because of just the different ways that you can do and set this up. There have been new updates since we were in distance learning, which I really like too, because they get feedback from teachers and they really take it to heart and make those adjustments. So as many of you probably noticed when you're kind of exploring, there's many widgets. There's 19 widgets or little things that you can change about this classroom screen. You can change the background. You can put little messages up here in the front. If you'd like to, you can even upload your own backgrounds if you'd like. Like I said too, this is one of my favorite ones just because it's kind of goofy and funny. But of course you can change it. Sometimes you can even have students share their artwork with you and you can put it up on the classroom either as a background or an image to start the day off. Other things, I'm going to switch my screen here to the next one. And so there's different things that you can set up. Oops, I'm talking too loud. Ahead of time. You can use a random name generator. You can change the work symbols for your students as you work through different stations. If you're using this for station rotation, you can use, for example, the stoplight to help students understand what they're working on. There's dice. You can change the different type of dice. So you can do a 6-sided, 4-sided. I mean, there's so many different options here. You can turn off the sounds if they're too distracting. And you can just click it, for example, and it will generate a random number. You have that stopwatch or that timer here. So you can choose what's the sound. So if you want to engage students in having more of that leadership, maybe the students will choose that sound when the timer goes off for that particular time. Because you can have multiple widgets on one screen, you can have one timer and sound for maybe group A and one timer and sound for group B. That's also an option. One of my absolute favorite things too, especially as a teacher, when we're trying to group students in different ways, you can preload a set of student names. And so you can actually have it randomly shuffle and show you student groups. What's also really fun about this too is if you say want a certain students in the same group, maybe they'll be the group leader for that day, you can lock them into place, but you can continue to shuffle the grouping. So maybe you want to change it up from one day to the next. This is the free version. With the free version, these classroom screens aren't saved. So once you close the window, they won't be saved. But again, they're so easy to create. You can create one set for each class if you teach multiple class periods, or just continue to make screens and shift through them through the day. That's another option as well. You can also create student lists. So I'm just going to show you really quickly. You can create student lists here. For the free version, you're allowed to create 3 student lists with up to 100 names. But you could also, if you're creating, like for example, the group maker, you could choose from one of the lists that's already created for you or you've saved, or you can create your local list. So if you have students or you have more than 3 sets or 3 class lists, this is another way to kind of bypass that and just keep a list, 1 name per line of students in each class. And you can create this group maker for the whole day to use for the whole day. Okay, so this is just one way again that we're switching from classroom management more towards classroom leadership, but it also helps with a lot of that transitioning between either stations or even just helping students, especially the little ones, really understand like, what is the next task? What am I working on right now? That's something that we wanted to share. So with that, these are just some things I just went over. So features, ways to use classroom screen, like I mentioned, grouping students randomly, using it for date and time. And here's are some other ideas or examples that we found on social media that ways that teachers are using classroom screen with their students. So before you have an online session, as you're working and students are working, for the agenda for the day, group A and group B, and then just that timer for stations. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Janelle, and she's going to talk about whole group rotation.
I love that tech tool. It's one of my favorites. Okay, I'm glad you guys enjoyed that one. Thanks, Shelley, for sharing it. So we're going to look at our final model of blended learning model. We're looking at whole group rotation. So whole group rotation is really when the entire class rotates the same time between learning activities that are face-to-face and that are online. When we spoke with teachers and we were working on helping them through distance learning and then transitioning back into the hybrid models that they were using at their school level, a lot of them were a little nervous about using flipped classroom model as well as using the station rotation model, because it does take more planning and maybe they weren't comfortable with videotaping themselves or finding videos. So this is one model that you can use that isn't as doesn't need as much kind of overview planning and as much it's kind of more closely related to how whole group instruction is done in most classrooms nowadays. So we're going to look at some different things about that. So some benefits for this, it really weaves that online element. So online learning activities can be tailored to address the individual needs of the learners. It allows for students to control the pace and path of their learning, which is really one of the big things about blended learning. It really eliminates the need to move. A lot of times we don't have a lot of space in our classrooms to create those stations that you saw in a lot of the videos that we're sharing or that we were talking about. Our rooms are packed with, you know, the furniture as well as the humans that are in there. So how do we do that? So we can easily move from that way by doing whole group rotation. It saves time, it's easier to keep organized, and it may even be easier to manage students. And the last benefit is it really creates time and space. So it allows teachers to work with individual students or small groups of students who need additional support, instruction, or scaffolding. It really provides opportunities to conference with students to review their work, discuss learning goals, and to conduct side-by-side assessments. And then it can provide more scaffolding and support, and it can be more effectively gauge comprehension and mastery. So even though we're moving as a whole group, really when students are with the teacher in the teacher directed section, you're working as a whole class instruction. But when we move to the online piece, there's time for students to work online, and you as the teacher are kind of moving throughout the space to give attention to individual students or small group of students. So it lends itself to that really getting to know the students a little bit more and where they're at and what you can help support them with. When you're planning for whole group rotation, you really want to identify the target skill and the learning objectives. You want to design activities that focus on the identified skill, and then you want to decide how the technology can be used to enhance and personalize learning. So we talked really early on in the presentation about the 3 M's. So having technology and just putting a student on a device is great. We have the material that's there and that we can use, but we really want to think about the method that we're using it. And that's where the intentional design comes in mind. So that curation that we looked at that video as well. So how can you curate that online portion for students so that it makes it hit the learning target that you want to hit in your learning goals? So some questions to kind of reflect on as you plan for whole group rotation and any kind of blended learning model that you want to look at. So how are you going to balance the online with the offline? How are you going to encourage both the individual and collaborative work? It doesn't mean that we're only getting direct instruction when we're working in this and we're only working individually online. We want to still have that collaborative environment and collaborative space and that peer-to-peer interaction with students. Do students enjoy the agency to make key decisions about their learning experience? How will instruction models, practice, or scaffolds be differentiated to ensure all students can be successful? And when will teacher work directly with students to provide additional support, guidance, and feedback? So this might be where we're jotting down anecdotal notes about certain students. And we're like, okay, I need to see student A, B, and C today because they have some needs that I need to be successful with or help them with. So I'm going to make sure I get to them today. So this is just some ideas and suggestions. These are not the end all be all list, but some offline learning activities could be discussion, feedback, small group collaboration, guided practice. Some additional online learning activities could be online research or exploration, personalized practice with computer program, review games, and digital notebook or portfolio. And again, these are some examples, and we shared a lot more throughout the presentation that could be incorporated in a whole group as well. At the bottom of the slide, there's lots of templates and some examples that you can see. And then we can just transition through the whole thing. So some challenge and solutions we always hear from teachers. These are things that I might have a challenge with. So hopefully you can look at these and kind of say, oh, this will be helpful. So we talked about a lot about managing devices earlier. So some things that you can do that with. You want to work directly with students and have that one-on-one time with them. Have a plan B. Tech doesn't always work. So definitely have an offline backup plan and be flexible. So it doesn't work today, that's okay. We're going to try something else. It was always, a quick switch when like, oh, I can't get on the internet with the students. So we're going to try something else when you're in the classroom. And then thinking about timing and pacing. What will you do for early finishers? And then what will you do for those who take a little bit longer? Okay, so our tech tool that we wanted to share for this one are Explore boards. So Explore boards are one way that you can work with students when they're doing the online portion. They get voice and choice in choosing what they would like to look through. So if we move to the next slide, there's a definition of what an Explore board is. It's basically a multimedia text set. It's a document with links to a set of different forms of media surrounding a common topic, theme, or issue. So it includes visual effect, organization, and inspires curiosity. So we really want students to engage in it. We want them to have that curiosity piece. So we want to include lots of things that they can explore within it. The next slide shows a bunch of different examples. So each of these images you can click into and see already curated ones that around different subjects. So we are CTE, science, STEM, and math. So when you look in here, there's some of those, but there's also ones for ELA and social studies and things like that. So we just, if somebody already has it, we want to share it and use it. That's what we do as teachers. So these are really great ones, are kind of fun and different ways to organize it and set it up. So there's no one right way to set up an Explore board. There's a variety of ways that you can do it, whatever works for you and for your students. And then really the purpose is to package content for students in a quick 8 to 12 minutes. So when you're looking at creating your Explore board, the pieces of the Explore board should be short and sweet and have that impactful moment. You really want to help them build that background knowledge, extend lessons with more than one resource, and prepare students for class lessons. So these are all different ways and purposes for Explore boards. And then the benefits are you really have that inquiry piece. It's something that students don't get a lot of to do on their own, but this way they get that voice and choice and to get to be curious and then get to really be independent. And then some more resources that we have for you. So how to create it. This is a great video series of 8 lessons on how to create one. We have a game board template if you'd like to use that, and then like a table template. So feel free to jump into those resources if this is something that interests you.
All right, sorry. All right, so now I'm gonna talk about really quick feedback in your classroom. And just like, in your lessons, feedback and kind of in our presentation, it always comes at the end. And sometimes you don't have enough time to do it, but we're gonna make it work and finish before our 90-minute time limit. So just really thinking about how you provide feedback, what type of feedback you give your students. We're gonna just share some examples of how you can do that. So in the next slide, it kind of shares 7 keys to giving effective feedback. Always, I think, in a classroom for students to be able to use your feedback to make their work better, providing it in a timely manner, making your comments actionable for the students, consistent. Those are all, I think, really good keys to giving effective feedback so that your students actually use it to make their work better. Peer feedback is also very beneficial because it allows students to practice, giving feedback to others, but also, listening and hearing their peers. Oftentimes, right, just that pressure from hearing what your peers say, especially at, the middle school ages, it really, I think, affects them. And so, but, showing your students and giving them time to practice so that their feedback is, positive, timely. I think that it's very helpful. And then we just put links again to kind of 5 ideas to implement peer feedback. And then here are just some, things posters that you can use in your classroom to, again, teach your students, how to be kind, how to be constructive, but also, specific in the type of feedback that they give. So here are just some examples of posters that you could put up in your classroom to help them practice the process. And then again, more examples of strategies. So oftentimes, right, having a process for the kids to go through. So these are just some examples of strategies you can use.
All right, so tech tools for feedback. We wanted to showcase all of the tech tools, of course. So we have Mote, which is a Chrome extension that allows teachers and students to record audio feedback and then also play it on any Google, like Google Slides or Google Docs. Vukaru or Vakaru, how people say it. This is also another way to record and then put a link to an audio recording into a comment on Google, either a slide deck, a Google Doc, and so on, and then Screencastify. These are all ways that we can provide students with feedback, either teachers to students, students to students, or students to teachers. And it's really powerful because it takes away, and it's not just typing, but you really get to hear the enthusiasm or the excitement, or even just how the students are feeling when they're giving feedback or even answering a prompt. So just different tech tools for feedback. So as we close, we do want to kind of just say thank you again, but really as you think about this session that you were just engaging in, think about that blended learning. Why would you do it? Why is it interesting? And why is it powerful and really effective for teaching and learning? Think about those 7 Ps that Janelle mentioned earlier, looking at participation, place, pace, student interaction, personalizing learning, preparation, and practice with feedback. We went through these blended learning models because these are the ones that we feel are either the most common or the easiest to adopt. But again, there are many different blended learning models. If you're interested in learning more about them, you can find the link at towards the top of the slide deck as well. So just a quick reflection, think about what are your biggest takeaways after attending this session. And just either think about it to yourself. If you're joining us with us online now, if you can just pop it into the chat, or you can unmute and share.
Thank you so much for this presentation. I think that for me, like, I guess I didn't realize what could be classified as blended learning because I've done like all of these in some sort of way, and I wasn't really thinking of it as being blended learning rather than just like kind of like the more formal, like here's everyone's watching this video and then here's this other part. I have some questions. I know we don't really have a lot of time. But I was curious to know, so you guys are all resource teachers. Do the teachers in your districts use blended learning consistently?
I wouldn't say that it's necessarily consistently, but I think a lot of them are aware and are learning different strategies, different ways to do it within their classroom, because again, it just looks differently in every classroom.
And we've been trying to embed strategies, blended learning strategies in our PDs more, ever since COVID. So I think we're aware and we're trying to utilize it and teach it as much as possible in our PDs.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. Yeah, I have more questions, but I know we're running out of time.
Yes.
So I'll go ahead and wrap it up. So mahalo to Trisha, Shelly, and Janelle for everyone's participation. We hope that you found this session helpful and made some valuable connections. Special thanks again to our sponsors, Sacred Hearts Academy Honolulu and the Augustine Educational Foundation for making this conference free for the past 10 years. Please help us by completing the survey on the website iTeach 808 so we can continue to receive grant funding. I'll go ahead and put that in the chat. You will also receive a certificate of participation after completing the survey and automatically be entered to win one of 10 $10 Target gift cards if you complete the survey by February 4th. The survey will also be sent to the email address that you registered with. Please make sure to check your spam folder for any emails from iteach808hawaii@gmail.com. Thank you again for being here. Feel free to join the other sessions coming up and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.